tell you a little bit about my history. Well, actually, it's more like her story because it begins with my great-great-grandmother. Well, actually, it doesn't. It begins with this morning when I poured myself a cup of tea for breakfast and I ate a chocolate chip cookie. It was a really healthy breakfast. And I was thinking that, this is a disc of buttery, sugared corn syrup, subsidized, Monsanto, packaged comfort, non-food, and on its package I saw that it was 310 calories, and thought about my friend who basically measured her worth in calories, and I think that it is awful we live in a society where women are taught to measure their worth in calories because they're worth so much more, or that I paid $5 for that box of 20 tea bags, and the laborers who pick the tea somewhere overseas were probably paid less than a penny per 100 boxes, and I know their labor is worth so much more. And I know this because my great-great-grandma might have grown the plant that might have produced the seeds that might have eventually become the plant that I drank this morning. It's highly unlikely, but it is possible, because you see, there was once the British East India Company that ran a lucrative trade selling Indian tea made by indentured servitude of brown bodies. There was a plantation on which my grandma worked, growing shipments to Britain and America instead of food for herself. There was a bunch of Bostonian belligerents here that decided to waste a boatload of tea by throwing it into the sea, but that's a different history. My great-great-grandma had 2 daughters that she loved dearly. She'd feed them with rice and chutney and care and loyalty and all she had. She taught them to read, saying that though the British had occupied our land then, they hadn't occupied our language, and she wanted better for her daughters. My great-grandma left the plantation and moved to the city. She worked in a soap factory and she met a constable there patrolling the streets whom she eventually married, though she knew that he made a living by locking up other brown bodies, and she had a daughter whom she loved dearly, and through the constable's influence was able to send her to school because she wanted better for her daughter. My grandma was gifted. She could distinguish stars by their luminosities and frequencies of light, detect fractal patterns in Martian clouds. She studied physics, and she was the first woman in Bangalore, a city in India, 5th largest city in Asia, to earn a PhD. She married a mathematician but wasn't able to teach because no one would hire a woman then. She had a daughter whom she loved dearly, and she wanted better for her daughter. My mother grew up scribbling words like musculoskeletal epidemia on the red oxide walls of a house that smelled like sweet sandalwood. She was bright and made it into medical school here, and she married a man from the US, and there she moved. The 2 of them came to the US with 2 suitcases and a 2-year-old child. They resided in the 2nd floor of a less than second-class apartment, and my mom finished residency while taking care of her daughter between calls in a starkly white room smelling strongly of anesthetics and disinfectants because she wanted better for her daughters. I am standing here telling you these stories because it started with what I ate this morning, and how women are now measured by the size of their waist or the color of their skin, or how the unattainable standard of beauty of worth leaves no rooms for the stories of struggles of women who have been through and are still going through so much here and abroad. It doesn't make the room for the sheer dumb luck and undaunted belief in education that brought me into this world from a woman who once grew tea. And I speak about it because women deserve more than this, and I want better for our daughters. This is totally off topic, but to anyone who's up here, you can't really see the audience. The lights are so bright.
Welcome to showbiz.
I like the engineer. So this next little spoken word piece is, usually I write about social justice or racism or sexism, but I was thinking about how, amazing it is that we're alive and where we came from, and here's a little bit more about me. I have bipolar, and sometimes in our crazy phases, we stay awake for 64 hours and hallucinate all these crazy things. So this is one of my trips that became a poem. But it makes sense, I promise, I think. To me it does. Anyway, so here it goes. To look back into space, as I was looking at the window, we were essentially looking back in time at the light that came off of the leaves of the tree. And if we looked far back enough into the clouds, we would witness the beginning of the universe, wouldn't we? If you mount a spaceship and travel to the edge of the ever-expanding world, wouldn't you be going backwards in time? And then if you located the Earth, and then you slowly started coming back to it, wouldn't you witness the Earth's creation and realize that we're still part of the exploration and the explosion that started all of this, and that time was contingent? You would eventually see the electrons and the brass clouds of the saxophones being put together, the carbon of plants that now became the microphone that I'm speaking on, the metal stitching together this building, and maybe you might even realize that if an atom was the size of a football field and the nucleus would be the size of a golf ball and the electrons would be grains of sand and the rest would be empty, and then you would feel the vastness of nothingness of space weighing on you, and you would know that you can mold clay into a pot, but it's the emptiness inside that'll hold what you want, and it's the hollowness of an instrument that makes the sound, and that we hear each other's voices through the collisions of gas particles moving through nothingness, and existence comes from that nothingness, and though you see solidity, we are not solid. After all, how can you tell if you're walking through the fog, or if you're less solid than a fog and it is walking through you? And we may not be more than dreams, conjuring up our own imaginary universes in our minds, being the only ones to bend it and access it. And we may come up with concepts of normality and purposefulness and solidity, saying that what I think is right, and I think, and therefore I exist, because we know it not to be true. We would like to stay blind to the fact that we do not know this to be true. Blind to the fact that normal is the most dangerous thing we could be, that complacent and unquestioning and unawed and bored by our platitudes may be our biggest danger. Blind to the fact that we were sewn together from stardust, that we may build factories that may spew gases to shield your view and vomit smoke to cloud your vision, but we will never be able to obliterate the fact that light from a star now deceased will forever continue to travel in all directions. And that the time a second ago was made up of an infinite number of sections of nows, each bonded into a smooth integral, making forever. There is no time in a universe without a margin and no center. And ever since, well, there is no since. And love, like atoms and electrons, has always existed like lights, and they're always only continuing to fold onto itself as we are only recycled, and they will still ask you to punch your mind with a number and to put it into a box and to quantify your vastness. They say the purpose of humanity is productivity and profit. They'll still tell you to commodify yourself to and enumerate you and try to smash you into a closet, to slap a label on you, to tell you that you are this, that you are wrong. But you were once a sycamore tree in an earlier life. You were vast and unending, and one day you touch the sky, and the next moment is a continuum of all and an infinite amount of choices. And no, maybe I don't have all the answers to this. I don't know how to jolt myself into seeing what each moment can become, but I do know one thing. The solution doesn't involve watering down my every little idea and creative impulse for the sake of someday easing my fit into a mold. It doesn't involve tempering my life to better fit someone else's expectations, and it doesn't involve constantly holding back for fear of shaking things up. This is very important to me, so I'm going to say this as clearly as I can. Screw that shit. So the last quote was from Randall Munro.